What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with another quick kind of tactics video. Just finished up my faction guides for each of the individual factions in the game. Go ahead and check that out on my channel. There's a whole playlist for that. Today I'm going to focus on a little bit more tactics, and I'm going to play some games here. So I'm going to play some games. I'm going to talk about attack timing. I'm going to talk about attack types, and a question I saw on the Reddit recently was when to ready versus attack. So we'll play a few games. We'll see what quest I've got up here and see if I can... I'll go ahead and complete these. And then we'll take a look. We're going to play some actual games. It's the final week of the season, getting into the last couple days, so these are probably going to be tough games, so we'll see how it goes. I am going to go ahead and start with my Tyranid deck, because I like to rotate from top to bottom, and that's the only one I don't have at 3k right now. Perfect, there we go. This is a Tervagon deck that I got from the Discord, the Warhammer Combat Cards Discord, where I went to the deck builds and asked for some advice on this. In the past, I've run a full deck with the Tervagon, which is, I felt, good, because you had a lot of variety and had a really dense deck, but this one leans on some pretty decently leveled cards, so I'm finally at the point where I can really run this. And it really leans on the Tervagon's ability. With only 4 cards in your deck, you can pretty much guarantee that almost every single turn you'll be able to benefit from that free card, and so you get tons of mileage out of the Termagant. It is questionable against Badrak, but I want to say I have won the last couple games I had against him, so we'll see. Just as a quick re-intro while this is loading, just to kind of set some background for the things I'm talking about. In any single turn, you have 3 individual attack types. You've got your ranged, you've got your psychic, and you've got your melee. Just checking to make sure my deployment isn't terrible here. Alright. You've got your ranged, you've got your psychic, and your melee, and I'll talk about those more in a minute. I can see those as the bars on the bottom middle, and you can also see those as the bars on the top right for your opponent. Now, those all have a flat default value that's shown as the fully silver bar. If the bar turns that darker gray, you've got a debuff, so it'll actually do less, and you should be able to click on these. Yeah, if you click and hold, you can actually see what the bonus or penalty is right now. Right now, if I make a ranged attack, it's going to be at negative 20. And right now, these will be at 0%, so there's no plus or minus. And then this one here, he'll hit me for 35% ranged. Now, the bonuses only apply on your turn. So if I use a ranged attack against him right now, and you can click on these before you actually decide to go with it, and this will summarize which of your cards have that attack type. You can see the Maleceptor over here will not attack with ranged. Instead, it will ready. So when it readies, it uses its ready value, which is a non-attack, and you can see those by clicking on the card. Does not have a ranged value, instead it applies a psychic debuff whenever you choose to have all of your cards do that attack type. Rewinding a little bit, when you choose an attack type, all of your cards use that attack type whether they have it or not. So this guy is psychic and melee, so he would attack in either of those, but if I choose ranged, he will ready. In this case, when I clicked on range just to check it, it shows me I will hit for a combined total of 101 and take back 22. And you can see right here that 22 is going to hit my endless card that'll spawn back, so I have no penalty on that, so I might as well shoot. Alternatively, I could do psychic, where he will not hit me back, and I'll charge up a better ranged attack. I may actually go ahead and do that, because right now my ranged attack is debuffed, so we'll go ahead and do that. And that wasn't really important, because I'm going to be hitting these taunt cards, these 2 drones here, and taking very little damage back no matter what. I really could have gone with pretty much anything. And you can see that he shot and only one of his cards has a ranged attack, and the other 2 applied their ready value. That was awesome. So because I had an area effect attack that hit in the beginning because of this guy with that psionic blast, I now have a clear lane here. So I can hit this guy both with the card on the left and the card in the middle. I don't think either one is enough to kill him though. So we're going to go ahead and go with this. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and go with this. And just as I'm thinking here, I can't really capitalize on having the extra lane because these have different attack types. And I can kill this guy on the right, so let's go ahead and clear that. And you can see that the attack value is red if the total value is lower than its base. So I was debuffed there just a little bit, so it was lower than the 97 he can usually, or 96 he can usually throw. Now this is going to be an ideal case because Tau is a really shooty faction, and this is a really shooty deck. So we're going to go ahead and pop off our Endless card, and this guy's going to use his area effect, which should kill that, which is... oh, great. There we go. And then if we do ranged, I'm not actually going to do ranged, I'm going to do melee. And so here's the thing. So I could do ranged, but what would happen is my Maleceptor would take a hit, and then I would just injure this, so I'd take that 49 back and not actually kill that, because this guy on my rightmost doesn't have enough range damage to attack. So it attack, goes from left to right, my big bug in the middle would shoot, and then my rightmost guy would shoot last, so I'd have to leave this guy on like 50 health. So I don't want to do that. So I can do melee, which I have a small buff to that, so I can both hit this without taking damage back and kill that guy in the middle. So it's just kind of a matter of figuring out what's your maximum benefit, and you can see the values of what damage you're going to take back with each attack type, but you do also want to double check where that damage is going to go, because some of the cards that would hit you back may die, depending on what attack type you do, before you would actually take that damage. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So here, this is an ideal case where most of my damage is ranged. I'm doing 152. I can actually do more range damage than he can, but most of that 152 is going to go into this taunt card, way overkill him, and I will take back a lot more damage than I'm dealing. I can also do melee, and probably kill that guy with no penalty and get a ranged buff for next turn, or I can do psychic. I'm going to go ahead and do melee though, because right now I have a buff to psychic already, and I want to preserve that. And that's the thing too, whenever you use an attack type, the attack types that you don't use build up that passive buff, that blue bar. And of course, if you're watching this, you probably already know that, but just in case, to go ahead and restate that. Ouch. Alright, well that's a bummer. So let's see here. We're going to go ahead and drop this here, and then we're going to drop this here. I may regret that, but we're going to do it. And now here's the thing. I am only going to shoot if I can take out this guy in the middle, which I think I can. And so now I've got a bonus, plus 55%, which with these two should be enough. Excellent. That will kill this guy. It will cost me this guy, but that's not so bad in exchange for that guy in the middle. I can keep long strike down with the Termagants. So I'm taking this hit, and again, he can hit me back for 300 damage against 2 targets, but since this card in the middle is going to die, I will not actually take all of that. I'll take the 146. So, alright, now I did make a mistake here. So one thing that's an issue with the Termagant is if he doesn't die, he does not redeploy. And since I've got him all the way on the left here, I would have to sacrifice the Harpy to long strike to get him back. The good news is I'm not going to need that because this guy's basically dead. And he went ahead and shot me because that was his best option. Melee would have taken damage without dealing it. Psychic would have done nothing. So yeah. So hopefully that was a decent breakdown of kind of when to ready versus when not to, and kind of how to judge which attack type. I'm going to play another game just to see if that makes more sense, or if that's kind of more a better example, let's say. Because that was kind of a weird case with the Tervagon and the Tau deck. They both wanted to do the same attack type, so you saw me kind of switching back and forth what attack types I was using. Let's see where we are here. Now, orcs are at the bottom. Excellent. This is a great one. So we're going to go ahead and use our little buddy Zagstruck, which is a perfect example to show with readying because he has an ability that affects readying. And these are also kind of upper level games, so you're seeing the decks that I use competitively in the like top 10%. I don't think I'm that high right now. And some decks you'll see against. Ooh, look at that. That is a nice high-rated Badrock. This is going to be a bad matchup. But we'll see. So the beauty of Zagstruck is his ability is when your card readies instead of readying, so you don't get the passive bonus. And winding back a bit, this does not have a psychic attack. So in a non-Zagstruck deck, if I chose to use a psychic attack, this card would ready instead. And it would give me a melee buff. So it would give me a little bit of extra progress on my blue stat bar on the attack. Because of Zagstruck, instead of actually getting that bonus, that card will attack. Attack at the full melee value, which is fantastic. So this was an interesting start. Let's see. So this is good and bad. It's good because he doesn't have a ton of damage showing there, which gives me a chance to really kind of lay in. And what you just saw happen is you saw that Warboss has both an attack on drop anyway, and then also has a ready when he deploys, so he hit twice. Once was only at his melee Furious Charge value, which was 40%, but the other, because of Zagstruck's ability, was at his full 84. And now here I do have Psychers. So again, if I choose the Psychic attack type, the cards that don't have Psychic will use their ready value, which would give me a melee buff. But because I'm using Zagstruck, instead that's a melee attack. Now what I was talking about with this deployment is he doesn't have a ton of damage showing, so I can tank a couple turns here and do some damage, and hopefully take down this Makari before it really becomes a problem. Ooh, that's a bummer. But he also has Makari on the board, which is also a problem because he does a really significant buff and takes a long time to bring down. So I'm going to kind of line this with some tougher cards. Now, I really, really like the War Boss, but losing him that early was brutal. And this is a really, yeah, that's a powerful Makari. So he's applying a significant damage bonus, so I really want him gone. And now talking about readies. In a case where, so right now, I could do melee, but if I do that, he'll hit me back. I could do ranged, but if I do that, he'll hit me back a lot harder at 201. So I'm going to do Psychic, but it's not a great choice because it's debuffed. So that's another thing to consider when you're doing this, is when you make your attacks, you want to make sure that they count, either because you get a lot of buff for your future turns, or because you can hit in a way where your opponent can't hit you back. And that's Zagstruck's biggest advantage, is his primary attacks are your Psychic attacks, which if your opponent doesn't have Psychic attacks, they don't hit you back at all, even if they have a melee attack where they would normally have hit you back. Ooh, gross. And so you can see just how much more damage these are dealing because of Makari and because they're getting a ranged buff sometimes from that outflank. Brutal. Oof. So we're going to try and take these guys down. And now there is kind of a balance to do with Zagstruck. So usually you want to use your Psychic attack so that you're hitting without your opponent attacking you back. But you also do slowly build up a melee buff, so sometimes you want to do a melee attack because it will hit harder than your base attack value. So here, if I had the 71 to take out that Dragsta, I would do that. However, I don't, so I'm going to go ahead and play a little more conservatively here. And the downside to Zagstruck's ability is that because you're not actually readying, you build up that melee buff a lot more slowly than you would if you did actually ready, which is a bummer. And that's going to be brutal. It's going to be the plane, and that's going to wipe me. That plane is just insane. So when I said this is a... Oh, yes! Okay, so I'm excited here because that didn't wipe me because the taunt had turned off. Because if he had killed that, so I tanked it. And here, I'm not going to ready. I'm going to use that melee buff to hit these surviving cards as hard as I can. And I'm also doing this on purpose because I want this 3 health guy to die in melee so he doesn't die to a range shot in the following turn. It's not going to help me because my surviving cards are already low enough health that they will die anyway, but that was the correct strategic move to win the game, which I'm going to lose this game, because I kind of knew that right in the outset. He's got higher trophies than I have, so hopefully I won't lose too much, but, you know, that's it, it happens. Yay, high-ranked Badrock. And what really cost me that game is early on I lost my really heavy-hitting card really, really quickly. It's really unfortunate. I should have watched that. I should have been more careful and deployed him kind of middle to late in the game. But it's just really hard to know exactly what to do with the Badrock. The debuff or the outflank Dragster was a surprise. You don't always see that one in those decks. Probably had to do with that player having a higher ranked one or a higher leveled one than some of the other cards they could use, but I was there. So we are going to play Orcs again because we need to get up to 3k. I can play Zagstruck again, but let's give you some variety. I'm going to go ahead and play with my probably mainstay Orc, who is the Squig Boss himself, Scribad. And I got a couple levels and some key cards in this, so this may be better. Usually this is the guy I consider to be my top Orc Warlord, so hopefully this works. Hopefully this has been helpful. I know there were some questions about this, and sort of strategic play can be a challenge. Couple things to keep in mind is what your attack types are, what your deck is trying to do, and you want to keep track of what your opponent can do and what that Warlord's ability is, so that you kind of can keep track of that. And now here during deployment, I'm considering what I'm going up against. So I want to get kills, but I also want my cards to build up fairly quickly. So here, I want to clear shields. So I'm starting with a higher melee attack on this guy and a higher ranged attack on this guy. And so because the Terminator over here has shields, the higher ranged attack is wasted. So if he decides to shoot me, which he probably won't apparently, so this is a perfect case. So if I do melee, I do not get that kill. I take damage on Makari. It still is better for me than for him because my cards also heal, but he's not doing enough damage for me to really worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and ready to take less damage on defense, prepare myself for a better offensive hit. He's probably going to debuff me again. Yeah, which is fine. So that lets me clear another shield off him. I took minimal damage, and I got this guy lethal. So in the past turn, because my melee attack wasn't actually going to kill this thing last time, it was not worth it to attack, because I would have hit him, had him weak, but then he still would have had another turn to act against me. So just to restate that, I readied instead of attacking to take less damage back, even though attacking was one of the better ideas for my warlord trait, where every time I do a melee attack I heal, but it doesn't matter if you're taking damage back. Here's another great case. Sweet. Wow, that ramped up real quick. So here I'm going to do the melee attacks, and I'm going to do it because I will kill this Terminator before he hits me back. So the weaker of my two cards here will heal without taking damage back. So that's why I'm choosing to do this melee attack, where instead I might ready to not take as much damage in return. There was Skulltaker's ability triggering to kill my Makari, which is a bummer. Well, that's right, it happens. Woohoo! Okay, alright. Start the taunt. It's a little early, but I think this is a favorable enough matchup that it should be fine. And there's that deployment timing. You want to deploy your cards where they're going to be impactful. I may miss that because I now don't have it when my Warlord is on the board. Mozrog is so tanky it shouldn't matter, but still. And now looking at this, I will kill that. And he's doing the bulk of the damage back, so we're going to go ahead and kill that. I'm still taking quite a bit of damage in return, but I'm okay. I think that was a decent choice. Now I could alternatively have shot, where I'll take a lot less damage back, or I could just have readied it and relied on his attack back to use the target acquired. But that gives me one turn of target acquired instead of two. Or, because it died, doesn't really matter. Alright, so that is concerning. That's a very, very scary card in that top level. But I think we have just the punch to knock him out. Even if that kills this dude, which it shouldn't. Yeah, he's going to hit me back real hard, but I will kill both of the alternate guys and still have a full board for Skulltaker himself. And Skulltaker's really powerful, but he's pretty glassy, depending on what level this is. And we're going to see that in a second. You can also check by clicking on it. So he's not max level, so I'm not as concerned about him as I could be. This guy's throwing really nasty ranged attacks, so I'll probably do that instead. So just some endgame strategy. So right now I have the edge, but what if I didn't? What if I didn't have a bodyguard to the left here? So imagine this Medicae guy was not there. If I did melee, and I didn't have enough damage to kill Skulltaker, which I actually do not. So this is a great example. So imagine here, I don't have enough damage to kill Skulltaker. I will take back his 215 on Mozrog, which would set him up to kill me next turn. Instead, I'm going to shoot him, which I think I actually have enough ranged damage to kill him, so I'll go ahead and do it. But that's this exact consideration. So you want to check these, check what the value is going to be, do a little bit of the math here, see if what you're doing is correct. If this Medicae was not here, I might not, and I didn't have lethal for shooting him, imagine that. I would not shoot him. I would ready instead to apply the melee debuff to try to take less damage back, and the melee buff for myself to make it more likely that I would get lethal next turn. He would probably hit me in melee, I would probably barely survive, and then I'd get the win. Whereas if I were to melee attack, now it is likely that I could possibly lose. So you want to check that. You want to take a minute to do the math and see what's going on there. Also, when you're checking that, note that some abilities don't show. So the actual damage dealt to a card that has taunt or target acquired applied to it, if it has target acquired on it, it's going to take more damage than is shown. If it has taunt, it's going to take less damage than damage shown. If it's got an ability like Morven Vol Shield, it's going to take less damage. If it has an ability on it, if your attacking card has an ability on it like say Eldrad's buff or Zemat Haya's ranged buff, both of those will actually do more damage than it says on the card. So when you're doing that math, it can be a little bit difficult sometimes to call what's actually going to be dealt, so you want to be aware of that. But yeah, otherwise you can check it, see the numbers, do a little math, and see what they're going to do. A lot of that gets easier as you play more, and you kind of know how a computer is going to play the deck you're playing against, just to kind of see. And it's going to be different. We're about to have a PvP battle. It's going to be interesting. Where you'll see that human players play this game quite a bit differently than robots, which of course is to be expected. And that's going to be interesting. A couple quick tips for that sync PvP, just to go ahead and throw it in there. One of the single biggest things that the AI does that human players don't is the AI, or the computer, will almost always play heavy-hitting cards late. It will usually hold the really heavy cards late, so it could play all of your taunt cards at once. It could play all of your cheap cards and chaff cards at once, which for some decks doesn't make sense. What you're going to see with humans is they're going to respond a lot more accurately to when they're playing what when. So someone like Tolmeron is going to play its heavy hitters early, where you may be used to seeing them played last. Likewise, a lot of the Tau shooting decks, they will tend to play their really hard-hitting ranged cards last, whereas they're likely to kill you a lot faster if it's a human player that knows to play them early. Now there's counterplay to that though, because the longer those cards are on the board, the more time you have to kill it, and the less you have to worry about later in the game. So some players still are going to keep them back, but you're going to see them played early a lot more often than you do when a computer plays it. Another thing too is the computer never redeploys unless it has to. It will not move cards around the board. If there's a card in one slot, that card is going to stay there, and you can pretty much guarantee that, unless a warlord drop is coming that will have to move it out of the middle slot. Human players will redeploy aggressively, so it makes it a lot more of a dynamic game and a lot more challenging in that way. That said, the computer is very, very consistent and doesn't make mistakes-ish. It will always make the most logical move, which sometimes isn't the best one, so that is something to be aware of. Whereas humans will make mistakes, which is funny. You can psych them out, they may not know what's coming. You can mess with them in ways you can't mess with a robot. So I do personally enjoy the sync PvP. It's pay attention while you're playing it. One of the things about it is that with the computer opponents, one of the things I like about it is you can let the game sit for a while and come back like 10 minutes later, and your game should still be up, so you can finish it out, play the next turn. So it's a lot more relaxed, laid back, whereas with the synced PvP, you have to wait for your opponent, you have to wait for your opponent to play, and you have to be there and ready to play back when they play. So it's a lot more like other deck-building PvP games, for better or for worse. You may love that. I personally like having a game that is a lot more flexible with play time, as opposed to having to be on completely and totally the entire time I'm playing. So that's, give or take. But I'm especially excited about this because this rewards track is awesome. I'm going to hit this pretty hard because I really, really love this card. It's one of my favorites, even if he's probably not the best. This is one of the best orc cards in the entire game, and I want that real bad. 20 wins is, wow. 1 coin, alright, fine, that's fine. Just the packs is really nice, the gold is really nice, even though end of season you get a lot, but that one is really where it's at, and this one is even more where it's at. So I will probably try to get those 20 wins. Depending on how things go, I may go ahead and record that. Should go for a couple days. I'll have some time to see those battles and kind of talk through the differences. That's all I got. Hope I didn't keep you for too long. Enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time.